What if I told you that the ultimate guide to surviving our current era of artificial intelligence and, digital overload isn't actually coming out of Silicon Valley?
Yeah, it's definitely not what you'd expect.
Right. I mean, what if the most advanced survival manual is actually a 3,000-year-old Sanskrit epic? The story of a defeated king who basically hacked the universe to build his own parallel dimension.
It sounds like pure science fiction, honestly. But the stack of research we are examining today frames this ancient text in a completely radical way.
Oh, absolutely.
It presents the story of Vishvamitra not just as some dusty myth, but as a highly advanced Theotechnocratic blueprint.
Okay, we need to pause right there because Theotechnocratic is a pretty heavy term. Break down what the source actually means by that before we really dive in.
Yeah, of course. So think of it as combining theology and technology.
Yep.
It completely strips away the sandalwood incense and passive prayer that we usually associate with mysticism. In this framework, spirituality is treated as a hard science.
Like actual physics or coding.
Exactly. The universe has an operating system, it has root code, and if you understand the mechanics, you can hack it.
I love that. That reframing just changes everything. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore how this defeated king used sheer, terrifying willpower to transform his absolute ruin into the power to manipulate reality itself.
Which is quite the pivot.
To say the least, we're going to extract what his Promethean spirit can teach you, the listener, about not just surviving, but really thriving when algorithms are constantly trying to hijack your attention. Okay, let's unpack this by going back to before he was a cosmic sage. We need to look at the man he was first, King Kaushika.
Right, so King Kaushika serves as the perfect stand-in for modern ambition. He completely dominated the material world.
We're talking wealth, power, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, massive wealth, political supremacy, and this totally unconquerable army. In the Vedic framework, the source describes him as the absolute embodiment of the Rajas principle.
Which we should probably translate for anyone who's unfamiliar. Rajas is essentially the energy of relentless ambition, passion, and ego, correct?
Yeah, that is the core of it. It's basically action driven by desire. And Kaushika thought he had conquered reality because he had conquered the physical board.
He was winning the game as he understood the rules.
Exactly. But then he meets the sage Vasishtha, who introduces him to a technological leap that completely breaks Kaushika's entire paradigm.
Right, so Kaushika visits Vasishtha's humble hermitage out in the forest. And despite Kaushika bringing this massive, hungry army with him, the sage feeds them all effortlessly.
Which is impossible physically speaking.
Exactly. He does this using a divine cow named Kamadhenu. But again, the source material explicitly warns us not to view this as some magical fairy tale farm animal.
No, not at all. The text reimagines Kamadhenu as a biological, etheric 3D printer.
Wow.
It's like a living interface plugged directly into the universe's creative matrix.
Let's really ground that metaphor for a second. Instead of a cow magically, pooping out swords and food, we're talking about a biological device that can pull ambient matter from the environment.
Right.
And instantly rearrange the molecular structure based on the user's input code. So it can synthesize food, weapons, or even artificial soldiers just on demand.
Which is wild. And when you view it that way, you can totally understand Kaushika's reaction. I mean, he is an apex predator king.
Oh, for sure.
He sees the ultimate piece of hardware, and he immediately demands it.
Yeah.
But Vasishtha refuses.
Naturally.
So Kaushika, operating on that primitive Raja's energy, just unleashes his entire invincible army to take it by force.
But Vasishtha doesn't fight back with physical weapons. He deploys a staff called the Brahmadanda. And the source describes this staff as an ontological singularity, which sounds incredibly cool, but how does it actually function against, real swords and arrows?
Well, an ontological singularity doesn't block a physical weapon by meeting it with physical force. It neutralizes the underlying reality of the weapon itself.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it accesses the root code of the cosmos and essentially turns off the physics that allow Kaushika's weapons to even exist.
That is terrifying.
It really is. Against a tool that alters reality at the source, Kaushika's entire military machine is just instantly reduced to ash.
I kept thinking of it like a modern tech billionaire CEO. Imagine you've got the most advanced hardware, sprawling server farms, unlimited capital.
You're untouchable.
Right, you think you run the world.
Yeah.
Then you run into a master hacker who doesn't care about your hardware because they have administrative root access to the internet itself.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
They just hit delete on your entire digital existence with one keystroke. Your physical servers are completely useless against someone who controls the operating system.
That analogy captures the devastation perfectly. The Hermetic and alchemical traditions call what Kaushika experiences Nigredo.
Nigredo, what is that exactly?
It's the blackening or the complete dissolution of the ego. It is a total ontological shock.
Because his whole identity is gone.
Right. His entire worldview, which was built on physical dominance, is annihilated in seconds.
Which usually breaks a person. I mean, standing in the ashes of your life's work, utterly humiliated. Most people would just spiral into madness or despair.
Yeah, they would. But Kaushika does something unnatural. He retains this core spark of awareness.
Really?
Yeah, he takes the toxic acid of his humiliation and uses it to dissolve his old identity. And from that sludge, he crystallizes a brand new, indestructible will.
So his logic is basically, if physical force is primitive, and Vasishta beat me using the universe's source code, then I just need to acquire the source code myself.
Exactly. He pivots his entire existence. He leaves his kingdom and begins the process of becoming Vishvamitra through a practice called Tapas.
Now, usually asceticism brings up images of, a monk sitting in a cave, starving himself, just passively waiting for enlightenment.
But the sources strip away that passive interpretation completely. Tapas is framed here as a highly engineered process of internal nuclear fusion.
Okay, wait. How does a human body perform internal fusion? What is the actual mechanism the text is describing there?
So Vishwamitra turns his biological vessel into a literal reactor. He takes his life force, his suppressed passions, his anger, and his suffering, and he consciously burns them.
Like fuel.
Exactly like fuel. By refusing to let those emotions vent outward into action, he creates immense internal friction. And that friction generates raw, cosmic energy, basically spiritual heat.
And while he's generating this heat, he's using mantras, but not as prayers asking for favors from the gods.
No, he uses them as sound codes.
Sound codes?
Yeah, they are specific sonic frequencies designed to interface with and unlock sectors of the cosmic intellect. He's literally brute forcing his way into the system.
The sources draw some fascinating contrasts here between Vishwamitra and other major archetypes we are familiar with. Take Neo from The Matrix, for example.
Right, Neo is a great comparison.
Neo is a systemic anomaly. He's the chosen one, guided by an oracle, operating as an inherent part of the Matrix's own balancing design. Or, look at the traditional view of Jesus' grace, descending from above out of divine love. Vishwamitra is doing something entirely different.
Yeah, Vishvamitra was not chosen by anyone. He is definitely not a balancing anomaly written into the code. He chose himself.
He hacked his way in.
He really did. He is a mortal forcing his way upward through pure, unadulterated willpower. He is an existential rebel declaring war on his own limitations. And the author draws a brilliant parallel to the pioneering Russian rocket scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky.
Oh, I love that part of the research. So Kaushika used mathematics and engineering to calculate how to overcome physical gravity, decades before we even had rockets.
Right.
And Vishvamitra uses the engineering of tapas to overcome spiritual gravity. He's calculating how to escape the gravity of biological limits and his social caste.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, his goal evolved far beyond just getting revenge on Vasishpa. He demanded an ontological upgrade.
He wanted to become a Brahmarishi.
Exactly. In this framework, that means becoming a sovereign neuron in the cosmic brain. He refuses to be a mere user of the system anymore. He wants equal administrative weight to the universe itself.
But, spinning up a rogue, unauthorized biological reactor to generate cosmic energy, that has to trigger massive alarms in the system.
Oh, it absolutely does. The universe's administrators take notice very quickly. The gods, led by Indra, who the text brilliantly casts as this perpetually anxious cosmic sysadmin, see a hacker gaining unauthorized admin rights.
So the sysadmin panics.
Big time. Indra panics and deploys a countermeasure, a celestial nymph named Menaka.
Here we must view Menaka strictly through that Theotechnocratic lens. She is not simply a beautiful distraction. She is a highly precise biological honeypot.
That's exactly what she is. The system administrators designed her to exploit a very specific, unpatched vulnerability in Vishvamitra's code.
Because he achieved his massive power by suppressing his biology, right? Not fundamentally rewriting it. He blocked the physical drives with his firewall, but the underlying root code for lust was still sitting there.
Yeah, the code was still there. So the system sends Menaka, the biological imperative, bypasses his firewall, and he falls. He spends years with her, draining all the cosmic energy he had painstakingly accumulated.
He just empties his battery.
Completely.
And then when he snaps out of it and realizes he's been hacked, his reaction is, well, it's something I really struggled with. He abandons Manaka and the child they had together, Shakuntala. He just walks away into the forest to restart his tapas.
It's harsh.
I have to push back on this. I mean, I understand the Theotechnocratic logic, but abandoning your child, it's incredibly cold. Does the source material excuse this behavior, or is it just presenting it as the brutal cost of cosmic business?
I mean, it is deeply unsettling from a human perspective, but the source doesn't ask us to morally excuse it. It asks us to view it structurally.
Structurally.
Think back to Neo. Neo's love for Trinity was his driving force, but it was also the exact vulnerability the architect exploited to manipulate him. Neo remained bound by his human attachments.
Right.
Vishvamitra performs what the text calls Svadhyaya. It's a ruthless, uncompromising audit of his own soul.
Basically a diagnostic check of his operating system to see how the hackers got in.
Exactly. He realizes the administrators used his own biology and attachments to break him. To achieve absolute sovereignty, simply suppressing nature isn't enough. He must completely uproot the emotional attachments the system uses as leverage.
Wow.
So the tragedy of abandoning his family is treated as data. It's a devastating failure that informs the next, more perfect iteration of his will.
So he patches the lust vulnerability and just starts from zero. But the system administrators try again. They send another nymph, Ramba.
But this time his code is updated.
Yeah, he spots the honeypot instantly and doesn't fall for lust, but instead he falls to pride and furious anger. He gets so mad at the system's attempt to hack him again that he curses Ramba, turning her to stone for 1,000 years.
Which is a huge mistake. In the yogic tradition, a massive outburst of anger acts as a catastrophic system overheat.
Really?
Yeah, he deployed so much concentrated energy to execute that curse that he burned through his reserves again. He emptied his battery all over again.
It's like his CPU spiked to 100% and crashed his entire rig.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, is a dynamic anyone listening can probably relate to.
Oh, absolutely.
You manage to quit one bad habit, say mindless scrolling, only to realize you've replaced it with something worse, like snapping at your coworkers because you're internally stressed. It's the relentless whack-a-mole of self-improvement.
It is, but the progression is what matters here. He failed, but he failed differently. He discovers that raw power without perfect emotional equilibrium is destructive and wasteful.
So he sits back down, patches the anger vulnerability, and iterates again.
Yes. And it's that relentless iteration that makes him terrifying to the gods. He eventually perfects his code. He becomes immune to lust, immune to anger, immune to pride.
Which brings us to his ultimate showdown with the universe. The story of King Trishanku. Here's where it gets really interesting.
So Trishanku is a mortal king who presents a completely absurd demand. He wants to enter heaven in his physical, biological body.
Which violates all the terms of service of the universe. You cannot bring dense physical matter into the spiritual cloud. Naturally, the gods refuse and physically toss him out of heaven.
Right.
He is plummeting back to earth. And Trishanku begs Vishvamitra for help. Vishvamitra sees this as the ultimate stress test of his newly perfected will, and he accepts.
Yeah, as Trishanku is falling, Vishvamitra looks up and utilizes Sankalpa Shakti.
Let's define that clearly. Sankalpa Shakti is pure, concentrated intention. Its willpower so dense it literally overrides physics. He stops Trishanku midair, suspending him in the sky. But the gods still refuse to open the gates to the old heaven.
And Vishvamitra's response is what separates a mere hacker from a master architect. He doesn't just look for a backdoor into the existing system.
What does he do?
He builds a new server.
Yeah.
He uses his accumulated cosmic energy to literally manifest a brand new parallel universe, complete with new stars, a new moon, and a new heaven, specifically designed for Trishanku.
He forces the system to accommodate a reality he authored.
Exactly. By creating a new universe, he proves that consciousness is primary and physical reality is entirely plastic to a perfected will. The cosmic administrators have no choice but to validate his code.
And his old rival, Vasishtha, finally bows to him, recognizing him as a Brahmarishi. The universe effectively hands him his admin credentials.
What's fascinating here is that the source text argues this Promethean spirit, this archetype of human willpower breaking reality's boundaries, isn't isolated to ancient mythology. It is a living, recurring pattern throughout human history.
Yeah, the author traces this exact blueprint through historical figures who rebelled against the systems of their eras. We see it in Mithridates, the ancient king who fought the Roman Empire. He didn't just use swords. He engaged in a very physical form of tapas. He microdosed lethal poisons over years to rewrite his own biological code, making himself immune to Rome's assassins.
We also see it in Giordano Bruno, who looked at the rigid, enclosed universe defined by the church and dared to imagine infinite parallel universes, much like Vishvamitra.
Wow, yeah.
He was burned at the stake for it, but his conceptual hack eventually rewrote human astronomy.
The source material even brings this archetype right up to modern global events. Now, I need to pause here and be incredibly clear to you, the listener.
Yes, very important.
We are strictly analyzing the conceptual framework presented by the author of the text. We are impartially reporting the historical parallels the author draws. We are not endorsing any political viewpoint, taking sides, or making contemporary political statements whatsoever. Our job is simply to show how the source applies this ancient blueprint to recent history.
Absolutely. With that absolute neutrality established, the parallel the author draws between the ancient king Kaushika and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Okay, lay that out for us.
The text compares Zelensky's life prior to 2022 to Kaushika's life as a king. Zelensky was a master of the media and political realm. He controlled narratives and entertainment, much like Kaushika controlled armies and wealth. He was winning the game within his specific reality.
But then comes the ontological shock. For Kaushika, it was encountering Vasista's raw, reality-altering power. For Zelensky, the author argues, it was the February 2022 invasion.
Right.
It was the sudden existential realization that all previous skills in peacetime media and politics were seemingly irrelevant against the raw, brutal reality of military force.
And it is at that precise moment of potential annihilation, that Nigredo phase we talked about, that the author claims the archetype activates.
When offered evacuation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Zelensky famously responded, "I need ammunition, not a ride." And the source text analyzes this specific phrase not as a mere quote, but as a modern manifestation of Sankalpa Shakti.
Pure, concentrated intention. The author argues that in that exact moment, just like Vishwamitra stopping Trishanku's fall midair, that refusal to flee stopped the psychological fall of an entire nation. It forced the global system, the complex, rigid web of international diplomacy, to alter its established rules to accommodate his will.
The source uses this to argue that the Promethean spirit refuses to submit to impossible odds. It forces reality to rewrite itself.
Which brings this entire epic crashing right into your living room. If this blueprint of willpower is active today, how do you harness it? Especially now, in an era where technology is actively engineered to make us passive.
It's everywhere.
We are surrounded by artificial intelligence, infinite scrolling algorithms, and bioengineering.
And the source offers a stark warning about that. Without a rigorously trained will, modern technology does not elevate you. It turns you into a passive consumer.
Like a happy slave in a digital prison.
Exactly, trading your agency for the comfort of convenience.
But Vishwamitra's journey gives us the tools to become a modern Theotechnocrat. And it starts with what the text calls digital silence.
So digital silence is the modern application of tapas. It means using technology not for distraction, but building firewalls to protect your attention, which is your most valuable cognitive resource.
You have to protect it.
You must consciously starve the algorithms that feed on your focus, redirecting that energy inward to build mental resilience.
Then there's the concept of the Exocortex. This completely changes how we should interact with AI.
Yeah, a passive user asks an AI to do their thinking for them. They outsource their intellect. But the modern tier technocrat treats AI as an exocortex, an external brain module.
So how do you use it?
You use it to rigorously audit your own code. Just as Vishvamitra hunted down his internal blind spots of lust and anger, you use AI to analyze your cognitive biases, test the flaws in your logic, and perfect your mental architecture.
And finally, treating your biological body as a platform to be optimized for peak mental performance, rather than a vessel just meant to consume hedonistic pleasures. So what does this all mean?
It's the ultimate question.
Yeah. If you're listening to this, are you looking at the next wave of tech and asking, what can this tool do to entertain me? Because that is the mindset of a passive consumer. Or are you asking, how can I use this tool to systematically dismantle my weaknesses and upgrade my own operating system?
That pivot is everything. Technology must never be a substitute for your will. It should be the hammer you use to forge it.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. From an ancient king standing in the smoldering ashes of his conquered army, to a cosmic hacker building a new universe, all the way down to how you manage the notification settings on your phone.
It's all connected. The journey of Vishwamitra teaches us that the boundary of human potential isn't a hard physical wall. It's just a mirror reflecting the current limits of your own willpower.
It forces the realization that your mind is the ultimate operating system.
You are either actively writing the code or you're being run by it.
Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. If reality is truly as plastic as Vishvamitra proved, and your mind is that master operating system. Wait, let me rephrase that. If your mind is the master operating system, what is the very first line of code in your daily routine that you need to rewrite tomorrow morning to start reclaiming your admin rights? Think about that invisible wall we talked about at the beginning. Tomorrow morning, take one step toward it and watch it move. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning those limits. See you next time.